And our first main topic today gets submitted to us by Raymond Reddington, who writes, I'm anticipating Spider-Man No Way Home like everyone else. Me too, brother. I liked Venom 2, and the Morbius trailer is interesting. I also enjoy going to YouTube channels that try to uncover every hidden or not so hidden clues in their respective trailers. But I wanted to ask you a question. The tea leaves seem so clear that Spidey is heading back to Sony and leaving the MCU. Why is it so hard for some of the Find the Clues channel to say that Spider-Man is leaving the MCU possible and or most likely happening? All right. Thanks a lot for sending that in, Raymond. Appreciate that. And yeah, this is a topic that's been brought up a lot around here when we're talking about Spider-Man. Obviously, we're closing in. I think we're roughly about 6 weeks away. I haven't counted the days. I'm just going to say we're roughly 6 weeks away from Spider-Man No Way Home hitting cinemas. We already have the first trailer. What we don't have is a second trailer, and what we also don't have is a poster. By the way, I'm hearing whispers we're going to get a poster by Friday. I'm not running that as a story because I don't know that I believe where I'm hearing it from, but I'm just letting you know. I heard a little birdie say we may have a poster by Friday. I don't know if I believe that or not, but we'll see. But we don't have a poster. We don't have a second trailer, but the thing is coming up. But the biggest topic of conversation, besides the fact of, is Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire going to be in the new Spider-Man movie? That's obviously the number one topic of conversation is Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire, I almost said Andrew Maguire, are Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire going to be in the new Spider-Man No Way Home? That's obviously the number one topic. But the second topic that people are talking about besides that is, what is Spider-Man's future after No Way Home? Where does he go? What happens? There are people like me who believe that that No Way Home is going to be the cataclysm that leads Spider-Man out of the MCU to have him go back over to Sony. There are many people who believe that this is just the beginning of a brand new era of Spider-Man in the MCU. But what Raymond Reddington is asking is, with all the obvious proof that Spider-Man is leaving the MCU, how on earth can anybody believe that Spider-Man is actually going to be staying in the MCU after Spider-Man No Way Home? How can anybody believe it? Well, as somebody who believes that Spider-Man is leaving the MCU, I will tell you, and I have told you, there are several very good reasons to believe. If you believe that Spider-Man is staying, there are several good reasons to believe it. I mean, I think he's leaving, but there are some solid reasons to believe that he is staying. And we're going to talk about some of those reasons by jumping into the Campea classroom for a second. Okay, so let's look at this question. Should I stay or should I go now? I feel like grabbing my guitar. So should I stay or should I go? Is Spider-Man staying or leaving? And we're asking the question, why would anybody believe he's staying? Well, we'll get to that in a second. Let's start with the reasons why he'll go. Okay, let's start with why he'll go, okay? Let's start with that. I think the first reason that you have to kind of buy into the idea that he's going to be leaving, I think, is the new Morbius ad is basically a promo for the Spider-Verse. We talked about this yesterday, right? Remember that? We talked about this yesterday. If you look at the new Morbius trailer, that gives references. The top is obviously a direct reference to the first Sam Raimi or Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. The second picture down from the top is clearly showing the Oscorp thing from Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. You have Michael Keaton representing the Tom Holland Spider-Man. And then, of course, the direct references to Venom, not just the Daily Bugle newspaper itself, but also verbally Morbius directly saying, I'm Venom, right? We talked about this yesterday, but basically when you look at this, the entire Morbius trailer was one big ad for the Sony Spider-Verse. For the Sony Spider-Verse. There was no references in there to Thanos or the Snap, or there was no references in there to WandaVision or to anything, or Captain America or Iron Man. But it was a full-on ad for the Sony Spider-Verse. Is that proof that Spider-Man is leaving the MCU to go over to Sony? No. But is it anecdotal evidence? Sure. I think you got to consider it a little bit of evidence. All right, so that's one reason why people like me think he's going to be leaving. The second is this: the limited duration of the new deal. Now, you guys remember that a couple of years ago, Sony and Disney said they were ending their deal, right? And everybody thought it was done. But then kind of at the last second, Disney and Sony came up with a new deal. But here was the interesting thing. The new deal wasn't for 10 years. The new deal wasn't for 5 more pictures. The new deal wasn't for whatever. It was a very limited time deal. Now, at the time when that deal happened, a couple of years ago, I said, you know what? It feels like this deal is being made so Spider-Man could have a really good exit out of the MCU instead of this abrupt ending and this abrupt exit out of the MCU, where 1 minute he's in the MCU and then all of a sudden we're told, oh, by the way, Spider-Man's not in the MCU anymore. So that's one. Is that proof that Spider-Man is leaving the MCU? No. Is it anecdotal? Yeah, it is. This other thing here, and by the way, going to give you guys a little bit of a warning right now. This next point is something you probably already know, but I am warning you, is going to be considered a spoiler for Venom 2 and the post-credit scene in Venom 2. The reality is, any of you guys who are even remotely interested in Venom 2, you've probably already seen it, or you've probably already seen the spoiler. But I am going to give you a warning. I'm about to go into spoiler territory for the post-credit scene in Venom 2, okay? Just want to give you that warning, giving that heads up. If you don't know what happens in the post-credit scene of Venom 2, please navigate away and, come back and join us for the John Campea show tomorrow, because I'm about to go into that, giving you a big heads up. Okay? Got it? All right, let's get back to it here. Another piece of information that I believe points us towards Spider-Man leaving the MCU is Venom 2 post-credits. It's obvious that Sony is not giving Venom to the MCU. But they did introduce a bridge between the universes. With whatever it is that happened at the end of in the post-credits for Venom 2, when the light flashes and all of a sudden Venom is in the same room, but it's very different looking now, and there's the Spider-Man, the footage from the MCU on the TV, what we know is Sony is too vested in Venom. They're not sending Venom over to MCU. Yeah, MCU, you take Venom now. We did all the work of making successful movies for him, but you just take him now. But they did create that bridge. I think, when I saw that, I was like, okay, now I'm more convinced than ever that this is all setting up Venom probably hooking up with Spider-Man and bringing him back over. I think that's what it points to. Other people might think it points to something opposite, but just there for that. Okay, another thing that people like me believe that, or why people like me believe that Spider-Man is leaving, another little piece of anecdotal evidence, is Kevin Feige's comments about Spider-Man being able to travel between cinematic universes. We talked about this on the show yesterday as well. You guys remember the quote from Kevin Feige in 2019 when they were talking about, yeah, we've read up the deal for a little bit now. And he said, Spider-Man is the one hero who has the ability to travel in between cinematic universes. I think that was paving the way that he's going to be traveling from the MCU and being an MCU character over to a different cinematic universe, being the Sony Spider-Verse. Now, I think it also keeps the door open that maybe from time to time, Spider-Man can pop back up in the MCU. I think it leaves that door open. But why would Kevin Feige say Spider-Man has the ability to travel between cinematic universes if he wasn't about to travel to another cinematic universe? So that's another thing. Proof? No. Anecdotal? Yes. Here's a big one, though. This is a big, big reason that most people haven't been talking about, and that's this. The guy who's been directing the Spider-Man movies over at Marvel, John Watts, he has done a great job directing Homecoming, directing Far From Home. This dude does not get enough credit, and he should get more credit. He's done a great job directing these films. But here's the interesting thing. Director John Watts is moving off of Spider-Man. John Watts is moving on to direct Fantastic Four. I mean, again, is this proof that Spider-Man is leaving? No, But the guy who's been directing and has directed all three of the Spider-Man movies under Marvel's banner, Homecoming, Far From Home, No Way Home, he's now moving on to a different property in Marvel. He's moving on to a different solo film. He's moving on to Fantastic Four. Again, is that proof that Spider-Man is leaving the MCU? No, but it adds to the mounting bit of anecdotal evidence. And then, of course, there's this. We talked about this, maybe it was last month or 2 months ago. I can't remember exactly. But there was the words from Tom Holland himself. And let's revisit what Tom Holland said here. Tom Holland said, we were all treating Spider-Man, this is him talking about No Way Home and his experience shooting No Way Home. We were all treating Spider-Man No Way Home as the end of a franchise. Notice he didn't say the end of this story. He didn't say the end of this storyline. He didn't say the end of this chapter. Tom Holland said we were treating this movie, Spider-Man No Way Home, as the end of a franchise. I think if we were lucky enough to dive into these characters again, you'd be seeing very different version, aka the Sonyverse version. It would no longer be the Homecoming trilogy. We would give it some time and build something different and tonally change the films. Whether that happens or not, I don't know. But we were definitely treating No Way Home like it was coming to an end, and it felt like it. Again, is there anything in Tom Holland's statements here that directly say, I, Tom Holland, and letting you, the fans, know that I am done playing Spider-Man in the MCU, and from now on, my Spider-Man will be over in the Sony Spider-Verse. No, it wasn't that direct. But again, look, when you sit back and start adding all these up, the new Morbius trailer was basically a promo for the Sony Spider-Verse. The limited duration, the fact that they made such a short deal for this new Sony and Marvel partnership a couple of years ago. They made it such a short deal. The fact, when you look at Venom 2's post-credit scenes, it's Venom opening the door for Spider-Man to come back over. When you look at Feige's comments about Spider-Man is the only character who can travel between cinematic universes yet, and well, we haven't seen him travel to another cinematic universe yet. That's coming. The fact that director John Watts himself is moving off of Spider-Man and now going over to Fantastic Four because we're not going to have Spider-Man anymore, so you're freed up to go do Fantastic Four, John, and Tom Holland's own direct words. I think when you look at all of that, it creates a very solid basis for believing that Spider-Man is about to leave the MCU. But the question Raymond is asking is, well, how could anybody think otherwise? Like when you look at all the mounting evidence, how on earth can anybody believe that Spider-Man is actually staying in the MCU? Well, I would actually say to you, Raymond, as somebody who does believe he's leaving, there's some very good reasons that somebody would hold on to the belief that Spider-Man is going to stay in the MCU after No Way Home. Let's talk about this. We'll talk about this, or should I stay? Okay, so these are some arguments about why he might stay. The number one thing is this. The partnership has been amazing success. I should have said has been, I can't speak English good. We'll say has been an amazing success. Listen, let's put two cliches together. Winning cures everything, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Put those together, what do you got? You got the Disney and Sony Spider-Man situation. Homecoming was a win. Far From Home was a win. People are buzzing like hell over No Way Home. Winning cures everything. And then, of course, my dad's old favorite saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You cannot discount the importance of this partnership between Sony and Marvel has been working. It's been working. I mean, it just has. Everybody's been making money. Sony's making money as the distributor of the film, and they've done a very good job with their marketing campaigns for those movies and their distribution. They've done a great job. That's been working great. Marvel's been making money. They get a little percentage of the box office, plus they get a big production fee from Sony. They've been making money. I mean, this is a big deal. You cannot undersell the importance of the fact that everything has worked with this deal so far. And that in and of itself, if you're somebody who believes that Spider-Man is going to stay in the MCU, that alone is a really good reason to believe that. All by itself, that's a good reason to believe that. Let's go on to another reason. The majority of fans, if we go back over here, want Spidey to stay in the MCU. Now, these Kevin Feige, the heads of Marvel, the heads of Sony, their number one concern is not what do the majority of the fans want. That's really not their main concern, but it is something you got to consider. And while there are people like me who thinks it would be a very exciting prospect to see Spider-Man go back over to Sony, because hard reality time here, guys, Sony has made the better Spider-Man movies than Marvel has. Just has. I mean, all film is subjective. I'm obviously saying that from my own subjective opinion, but I'll use the verbiage. They just have. Marvel has never made a Spider-Man movie as good as Spider-Man 2. Marvel has never made a Spider-Man movie as good as Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Again, all subjective, but that is my point of view. Sony has just made the better Spider-Man movies. And so on that basis alone, somebody like me finds it very exciting that he could go back over to Sony. I also love the idea of Spider-Man being a legitimate great hero on his own, other than having to have Uncle Tony Stark and giving him little Iron Man Jr. armor. But I won't go into that whole rant again. But despite the fact that there are people like me who feel that way, the reality is the majority of fans out there, the majority of you guys watching, having the audacity to disagree with me on this. But the reality is the majority of you guys want to see Spider-Man stay in the MCU. Is that the most important thing? No, it ain't the most important thing. But is it a big thing? It's a big thing. Just like the success of this thing has been huge so far. Another argument about, or another good reason that you can rely on if you're somebody who believes that Spider-Man is going to be staying in the MCU, and this isn't a small thing. Think about this for a second. It's up until now, there hasn't been any storyline in the Spider-Man arc that at all appears to be leading him out of the MCU. Now, why is that significant? Well, here's why it's significant. If I'm right, and I don't know that I am, but if I'm right, and Disney and Marvel extended their deal with the express purpose of having Spider-Man have a proper exit out of the MCU, well, then you would think, narratively speaking, they would be dropping those types of story hints, right? You'd think up until the movie that's going to do it in No Way Home, you would think that they would start laying out some breadcrumbs. Wouldn't that be reasonable? Would you not in advance start laying out some story breadcrumbs that could lead into this big culmination in No Way Home that leads to Spider-Man going out of the Spider-Verse or going out of the MCU? Is it absolutely necessary? No, but it would stand to reason that maybe you do that, and they haven't done that. And so I think if you're somebody who believes that Spider-Man is going to be staying firmly in the MCU after No Way Home, I think you've got some very solid, firm, logical arguments to stand behind. The fact that the partnership between the two companies has been amazingly successful so far. The fact that the majority of the fans want Spider-Man to stay in the MCU. And look, up till now, there's been no hint in the story. There's been lots of hints outside of the movies, but within the movies, there hasn't been the slightest hint of a possibility of Spider-Man leaving. So here's what I would say, Raymond. This is what I would say. I would say that, yes, I believe that Spider-Man is leaving the MCU, with the possibility of popping up now and again. I don't know what else you could possibly think Kevin Feige was talking about when he said our Spider-Man is the one character that can travel between cinematic universes, but that's what I believe. But unlike what you're saying, Raymond, it is not crazy to believe he's staying. There's a lot of very solid reasons to believe he is. And by the way, I probably didn't even cover all of them. Do you guys have more reasons why you think it's clear to you that he's going to stay in the MCU. I think there's a lot of reasons saying it's clear he's going to leave. I think there's a few saying it's clear he's going to stay. What do you guys think? Did I miss any of these things? Whatever you guys are thinking about this or have to add to this conversation, jump on down into the comment section below and leave us your thoughts.